Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a Cotes du Rhone wine. So we're in the southern Rhone Valley of France. The producer, quite a high profile producer, Chapoutier. This is their 2022 Cotes du Rhone. And I should say they do make other Cotes du Rhones. Probably the best known is one labelled Belle Ruche. This is not that wine. So the Chapoutier family have a long history of grape growing and winemaking in the Rhone Valley. They started off as grape growers in, I believe, 1808. And then in 1879, somebody called Polydor Chapoutier, who was head of the family, shifted them into winemaking and set them on that course. The next substantial change in the fortunes of the family company probably came in 1988, when Michel Chapoutier returned from his studies as a winemaker and some travels that he did to take over making wine at his family's company. It seems that the company was in something of turmoil at that stage. It had been run by his grandfather, Marc Chapoutier, who had nominally handed over control of the firm to Michel's father, Max, but evidently Marc stayed very involved in the company, and I think it was quite a difficult working situation. And by the sound of it, very quickly Michel realised that this wasn't going to work. So in 1989 he gave his grandfather an ultimatum. He was going to leave the company unless his grandfather sold it to him. So at the age of 26, Michel Chapoutier bought his family's company, and realising that he wouldn't be able to work easily with them, proceeded to fire both his father and his brother. And while he'd been the winemaker, it was they who had been in charge of aging the wines here. It's notable that some of the important changes that Michel made when he took over the company were, first of all, to move away from using large oak and to increase the amount of use of small barrels and new oak in the aging, particularly of their top wines, the Hermitage, the Cotes Rôtis. But also he was an advocate of bottling wines unfined and unfiltered. The other big change that Michel slowly implemented was to move the family's viticulture to being organic and to being biodynamic. And the sweeping changes he introduced soon ensured that the company's future was safe, and in fact that Chapoutier became acknowledged as one of the leading producers in the Rhone Valley region. Another change that Michel implemented, for instance, was in 1996. I don't know if you can see there is Braille on the label here. And the reason for this was in recognition of the fact that somebody called Maurice Monnier de Césarin had been a huge influence on the development of Braille in France, and evidently he had owned the family's largest vineyard on the Hermitage Hill, or his family had owned it prior to the Chapoutiers owning it. So that, in recognition of that, all their labels since 1996 carry the labelling in Braille as well as just in print. So today the company is probably most famous for its Hermitage wines, of which it makes a number. It also makes Cotes Rôtis, makes Condrieu, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, Saint-Joseph, Saint-Péray and Crozes Hermitage, along with a whole range of other wines from the Rhone Valley. But they've also developed interests in wineries elsewhere, so they have a winery in southern France, in Roussillon, and they have ventures in Australia, in Alsace and in Portugal. Anyway, to come to this wine, so really a note on the back label, it simply says Mise en bouteille par M. Chapoutier, France. So I'm assuming this is a wine they've made as a négociant, buying fruit or wine from other growers or producers. I'm told the blend on this is 70% Grenache and 30% of Syrah. It's likely that Cotes du Rhone wines at higher prices will contain a higher proportion of Syrah. The information we're given is that the Syrah here grows on deep, free-draining, loess soil, and that holds water but doesn't give it out excessively and therefore restrains the plant's vigour. The Grenache vines here grow on low fertility, sandy gravel soils. These are gravelly alluvial soils containing limestone platelets over a clay mix. And the other thing they note is that these vineyards are surrounded by what's referred to as garrigue, the sort of the local scrub, with proportions of things like thyme and lavender, which are likely to give aromatic influences to the wines from these vineyards. What we're told about the winemaking is that the fruit is destemmed and it's crushed, it goes into concrete tanks, and there it will spend 4 weeks fermenting. At the beginning of the ferment, they'll do 2 rack and returns, so they take all the juice out from under the skins and return that over the top, and that gives plenty of oxygen to the wine and will help promote the ferment. Throughout the rest of the fermentation, daily pump overs will be done, where juice is pumped from the bottom back over the cap of skins continuously, so the tank is kept full except for the portion being pumped at any one time, and that will keep the floating cap of skins moist, and it will give gentle extraction. During the period of fermentation, the temperature will be controlled to stop it from getting too hot. However, at the end of fermentation, it's allowed to go up to about 30 degrees, and that will help polymerize the tannins, will help fix them in the wine at the end of the ferment there. And the wine then rests in these concrete tanks for a further 6 months before being bottled. So it's bottled without any oak influence. So let's see what we make of the wine, shall we? There's quite a nice dark colour. It's a deep, almost sort of black ruby note. I can see through it. It's not opaque, but you know, there's a good depth. There's a purple-ish note on the rim, but it's a red purple rather than a blue purple. Swirling it, the wine has 14.5% alcohol according to its label, and is quite readily throwing some tears on the side of the glass there. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? There is a lovely, bright, fresh, lively, aromatic quality to that. There's a sort of a red fruit, a lifted, almost sort of floral character to the aromas. Perhaps some sort of, when I say floral, something like peonies, quite a rich red fruit note. There's a ripeness and a warmth in there, and it's sort of almost a little bit of spice. I mean, it's not oak spice, it's more sort of peppery spice. But yes, there's this lovely, ripe, bright character to the fruit. So let's have a taste. On the palate, that's dry, medium to full bodied, and it's really sort of starting to open up and fill my mouth there. There's quite a warmth at the back palate from alcohol. There's quite a concentration of fruit. What starts off sort of as a continuation of the aromas, that sort of floral red fruit, the perfume notes are being supplanted by a real opening up of some rich black licorice notes at the core. There really is a sort of a ripe, dense, concentrated, dark licorice note on the mid palate there that's spreading across my tongue. It's quite mouth-filling. In terms of the structure of the wine, it's smooth, it's quite velvety, it's almost chocolatey smooth, although there aren't any chocolatey flavours to complement that. The entire fruit character is fairly straightforward. There are no oak notes overlaying it or anything like that. There's a quite impressive depth and concentration there. It's fine, dense, concentrated, smooth structure. I'm left with this sort of rich, warm, almost pontifract cake, sort of sweet licorice note. And to the finish, you start to get just tiny bits of the red fruit perfume reappearing, and there are hints of sort of delicate peppery spices, but they're not particularly strong. The finish is quite straightforward, but is lasting reasonably well. I don't think this is a wine I would keep in the cellar for a long period. I don't think there would be a problem for keeping it for 4 or 5 years. I'm actually quite impressed with the concentration of the fruit it's got there. It doesn't need softening. It has a nice bite of fruit, these slight spicy notes, and I think given the perfume notes that I'm seeing on the finish, there's actually a reasonable underlying acidity. It's not obvious, it's not standing out, but it's sufficiently present to balance the wine. We don't as yet have an aggregated critics score for this vintage of this wine. We do, however, have a score of 86 out of 100 for all the vintages. I think that's perhaps being a little harsh on this wine, but I do also note that it gained a commended at the International Wine Challenge, which I would probably equate to a ranking of about 86 out of 100. As I say, I think I've been more impressed with this wine than either its score or that award would suggest. This is by no means a top Cotes du Rhone. However, it is, I think, a good, solid example of the way that I expect Cotes du Rhone to taste. And at what is not a particularly high price point, I think it's offering some really quite good value for money. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you found the video of interest. If you've enjoyed it, we'd be very grateful if you'd press the like button. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, do please consider subscribing to our channel. It would be fantastic to have your support there. And that way you can set yourself an alert and be notified every time that we publish a new tasting. If you have any comments, please pop those in the comments box below. We'd be really interested to hear what you think about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else related to that. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, we'd be very grateful if you'd consider forwarding this video to them. We'd really appreciate your endorsement. I will be sure to leave a link to the Wine Searcher webpage for this wine so that you can find out where it's available in your market, what its price is. You can have a look at the details we have for the winemaking. You can see some background information on the region, the producer, the grape varieties. You can see the critics' reactions to the wine. You can see other users' reviews. You can see price history. We like to think that we're giving you all the information you'd need to make an informed decision about possibly buying the wine. So anyway, thank you so much again for joining us, and I do hope you'll manage to make some time. Come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Bye for now.